Now then, let's move on to Germany. Leading diplomats from the group of 20 nations, that includes the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang, are gathering in Bonn. This is meant to pave the way for the G20 Summit that will eventually take place in Hamburg in July. Heads of state, of course, will gather for that one. Upon arrival, Wang met with the German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel. Their newly appointed US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is also taking part. This two-day informal ministerial meeting will focus mainly on the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, as well as other peace and partnership activities with Africa. Other notable issues on the agenda include multilateralism and globalization as well. Guy Henderson is live in Bonn tonight. He's covering the meeting of the foreign ministers of the G20 countries. Guy, what's the latest from the summit so far?
Well, a lot of fuss being made about this meeting between Rex Tillerson, the US Secretary of State, and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, which has taken place here, and a slightly different tone coming out of that meeting from the one we've heard from both candidate and President Donald Trump, who has at times, of course, been quite praiseworthy of President Vladimir Putin and expressed a real willingness to warm ties quite rapidly between those two countries. Out of that meeting, though, we've heard from Secretary of State Tillerson saying that he does think there are grounds for progress, but a remarkably similar tone when talking about Ukraine from his predecessor, actually, saying that Russia must meet its commitments when it comes to the Minsk peace agreement. Comments from Lavrov as well, saying again that there were points where the two countries could potentially make progress in bringing ties closer. An obvious example there would be the fight against terrorism and ISIS in the Middle East. But he said that in all likelihood, there would never be a complete ironing out of all the differences between the United States and Russia. This, of course, the backdrop to this being mounting pressure on whether certain members of Donald Trump's campaign team may have been a little too close to members of the Russian intelligence services during the US election campaign.
Indeed, so quite a lot going on there, Guy. But let's focus on Africa. It's on the agenda for this particular meeting. Is it only going to be discussed as the source of the migration problem, at least problem from the EU perspective, or is it going to be seen as a viable investment destination, or perhaps both?
Well, I think both. The only African member of the G20 is, of course, South Africa, a major economy that would undoubtedly see itself as a viable investment destination. When it comes, though, to countries further north, particularly in the Sahel region, I think, as you say, the migrant crisis is much higher up the agenda and much more, a higher priority in the discussions. But I think also it is broader than that. I think that the instability that the European Union sees all across its southern border, across North Africa, I think it sees that as a direct threat to the EU at a time when it's already facing a number of major threats. And it is looking to increase its engagement with that part of the world, both in terms of emergency humanitarian aid, and in fact, just after the G20, Germany will be hosting a donor conference for the Sahel region amid some quite significant fears of a growing humanitarian crisis around Lake Chad. Then, of course, stepping up its peacekeeping and military operations in that part of the world. And you had mentioned before I came on air about a possible NATO involvement in Libya in the weeks or months ahead. But ultimately, I think it is that long-term investment, building up stability, so that there can be more viable economic partnerships, not just humanitarian.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for that. That's Guy Henderson, of course, in Bonn. We'll be covering the meeting of the G20 foreign ministers for the next couple of hours.